Welcome to Better Relationships, Better Life, where relationships expert Judy K. Herman and her guests share insights that can help you move through conflicts in your 9-to-5 jobs and your 24/7 lives. Crack the clarity code and create deeper connections beyond the messiness of relationships. Here's your host, Judy K. Herman.
A lot of what we discuss on this podcast is relevant to both personal and professional relationships. As a speaker and retreat facilitator, I also support organizations and leaders. Find me on LinkedIn, Judy K. Herman, or my website, judyspeaker.com. John Noltner is an award-winning photographer who has worked on 4 continents, gathering stories of human courage, grace, and resilience. He has produced projects for national magazines, Fortune 500 companies, and nonprofit organizations. His multimedia art project, A Piece of My Mind, reflects his belief that art and storytelling can help individuals, organizations, and communities articulate their deepest values and encourage action toward building social capital and community connections. Let's listen in as we talk about deepening connection through listening, creativity, and risks of growth. John Noltner, thank you so much for being here. And you are a storyteller and a photographer, and your organization is called A Piece of My Mind. And I am so glad to meet you. It was awesome that we met, I don't know, a month ago, was it? Or just a few weeks ago at the Wild Goose Festival in North Carolina. And I was so touched by what you're doing. And so share with folks who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. I'm really glad to be with you, Judy. And like you said, it was delightful to meet you at Wild Goose. Today, I think we're both much cooler than we were in the 95-degree sticky weather in North Carolina for Wild Goose.
So, quite a festival. I don't know how many people were there. Maybe a couple thousand.
1,500 at least. I'm not sure what the total number was. But it was a big crowd. It was good. So as you and your viewers will see, I'm coming to you from our mobile office and home and world headquarters for A Piece of My Mind. This is Vinny Van Gogh, our van.
By the way, I need to let folks. We need to just make sure folks know that this is a piece, P-E-A-C-E, right?
Yeah, P-E-A-C-E. It's very different than saying A Piece of My Mind, the P-I-E-C-E. And that's a play on words that I love, and we can get to that in a little bit. The project A Piece of My Mind is really a storytelling project, and it's a thing I've been working on for a dozen years. I spent my career as a freelance photographer, shooting for national magazines and Fortune 500 companies. Back around 2009, 2 things happened in my life. The first is that my soul was getting pretty hungry. I was frustrated with all the things that asked us to look at what can divide us. And I wondered if there was something I could do with my photography and storytelling to remember what connects us. The second thing that happened about then is I like to say the economy handed me some free time.
There's an opportunity, right?
It was an opportunity, as my friends would say. The recession hit the world of freelance photography really hard, and I found myself with some time on my hands. I was curious. I wondered what would happen if I started interviewing people, if I sat down with folks and I just asked them, what does peace mean to you? I was having a distinct lack of peace in my own life at that time, because of the financial stress, because of the angry voices in the world. And so I just started sitting down with people from all different backgrounds, asking them, what does peace mean to you? How do you work towards it in your life? What are some of the obstacles you encounter along the way? And we talked to people from all different backgrounds, Holocaust survivors, refugees, activists, artists, politicians, really a broad cross-section of who we are as human beings. And slowly started sharing these stories out. We have a podcast, we've got a website, we've got now 4 traveling exhibits and 3 books. And so
Wow.
we bring these stories around the country to encourage people to have conversations about important issues. And
That's amazing. I do want to let you know and let folks know I'm I don't know, 3/4 of the way through this. It's just very profound. It's definitely feeding my soul to read your stories. And I know that you're a freelance photographer and a storyteller, but John, it seems like, and I'm a therapist, so it seems like, but you're listening to people, you're providing such healing, which I think is such a gift that a lot of people don't have. So, but let me back up a little bit, because you had this hunger in your soul, I think is the term maybe that you used or something. And the economy was kind of going haywire or whatever. Explain where you were personally at that point. You were married, you had 2 kids, kind of like, what was the back end story of where you were?
Yeah, we were living in suburban Minneapolis and married with 2 kids and a dog in a 1960s split level. And but really, really feeding my soul at the time with my work as a freelance photographer. My identity was really invested in being a father and a spouse, but also in being this creative soul that could, people would call me up with an assignment and I'd run across the country or around the world to photograph their assignment and deliver them beautiful pictures. And that was great. It was a lot of fun. I might be photographing pig farmers one day and a luxury spa the next day, and a musician the day after that. And so there was a lot of beautiful variety in it. And when you're a freelance photographer and the phone keeps ringing and people say, "I love what you do, let us give you money to do more of it," that feels pretty good.
You were in your zone already
I
with
was in
the
my
photography
zone.
and that creativity in you.
Yeah. When the recession hit, the brakes went on really hard and the phone stopped ringing. And so that affected our financial life. That affected my emotional life. That affected my my sense of worth.
Mm.
All of a sudden nobody wanted what I had to offer,
Mm.
and it was because of large economic um patterns that were going on, but it impacted me directly. And people who I really enjoyed working with lost their jobs.
Mm.
And a lot of people around me in the creative world were struggling, and it was a difficult season. And so when this all happened, when I started this project, there was a lot of personal turmoil. Was I going to be able to provide for my family?
Well, let me hold that, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
men that they go through, at least, folks that I've counseled with for many years in the privacy of my office, and entrepreneurial type of couples. And that can really destroy a marriage. It can destroy a family because of all of this. How did your family stay together? How did you did you have, tell us more about maybe even the dynamics of your family or even your marriage to go through what likely was a very low point for you, for everybody, right?
Yeah. Karen is a really patient soul. I did not marry into money, so she's not a millionaire, and neither am I. So we had some real challenging decisions to make about how we were going to make this all work. Our kids, I don't know, they're 27 and 24 now. So you back
Mm-hmm.
up a dozen years. So that was 15 and
Yeah, adolescence.
12.
That's a real crucial time of their lives, isn't it?
Yeah. As we look back, as we have conversations with them now, they're like, no, we never really felt like we were suffering. They didn't
Wow.
they got to eat every day. They got to, buy new clothes when they went to school, but we had to make some serious decisions. I had this beautiful four-door pickup truck that guzzled gas and had a big payment every month. And my wise wife looked at me and she said, maybe we need to get rid of that truck. Maybe we need to buy a 10-year-old Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. And that felt a little bit like failure to me, but it was the right decision. It was the right thing to do. And one of Karen's gifts in the world is that whenever we face hardship, she just sort of shrugs her shoulders and says, well, we'll figure it out.
Wow.
And
That's really wonderful, because not every couple has that. And what a gift that is, that you and Karen have that you're not, that she, I mean, that's what I'm hearing, that she was very supportive of you and during this real crucial time and making some big decisions. I'm just wondering, even for both of you, to have like not hanging on too tight, but being able to let go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, was that a natural thing for you too? Or was that cultivated?
I think it was cultivated, because I think as a freelance photographer, you constantly take risks in the world. I left my full-time job like 2 months before our first child was born and 2 months after we bought our first house.
Wow.
That's not really a wise financial choice to make, but it was the right time to do it. And so over the years, every time it was time to grow the business, we had to make some choices around risk and turning away some smaller clients to welcome some larger clients and make the space for that. And so over the years, we probably had a lot of practice at navigating risk and accepting risk and letting go of the certainty that some people like to hold on to. And over the years, we found that it worked for us. That didn't mean it was always easy, but it did mean that we typically survived it, and that there were lessons learned out of it. And so we became comfortable with that. Well, comfortable might not be the right word, because there's still, it would be a lie to say that there weren't nights that we laid in bed and stared at the ceiling and wondered how it was all going to work, and had some difficult conversations, maybe not comfortable, but open to that note.
Well, when I first met you and you were, I saw where you were traveling in your Vinnie Van Gogh. This is your home, actually. So I was thinking, oh, he's leaving the festival and then he's going to be driving a few miles and then going back to his home. But you do not have like a brick and mortar home anymore.
No, that's right. We and that was another step of into living this project. And it was another step toward risk, but with the belief that it would provide benefits and that it would be a worthy journey. And so in the fall of 2020, in the thick of the pandemic, we sold our house of 20 plus years.
Wow.
We gave away or sold most of our stuff. We have a little storage unit now that keeps some memories and mementos, but otherwise this van is it. This is our home. And we've been on the road for 2 years now. And it's when we talk about it, Karen and I say the weirdest thing about it is that it doesn't seem weird. It just seems like a natural extension of what we were doing in the world.
You've really, I'm like so impressed by that. I myself have wanted to become more of a minimalist. And I know of some friends that have like lived in these big houses and then they move into a tiny house. I've got a friend that actually lives on a yacht with her husband and her 2 kids. And I'm thinking, wow, that's just a different way of living, of letting go of stuff that you don't need. But I kind of want to circle back, because to really, for you to express even the magnitude, if you can possibly, I don't know if you can even express the magnitude of the piece that you are, that you're creating, your part creating. And when I was at the festival and I saw your setup and your displays, I made a comment to you, John, about, I thought, wow, you're capturing the very essence of this person. Like, it's not just a photograph of a person, but it's you capture their essence, which I was so touched by. And so share more about about your bigger mission and what you're, yeah.
Yeah. So let me start by saying that as a photographer, I have always believed that there's beauty and wisdom all around us.
Mm,
If we take the time to see it, and if we
mm,
take the time to hear it. And so that's what this process has been. We have two formats when we're gathering stories for a piece of my mind. The first is these long format interviews where I'll sit down like you are here and I'll interview somebody for an hour-long podcast. And then we do, because I'm a photographer, we do a portrait as well. We try to find maybe some context, some place to put them that helps tell their story, and we do a portrait. The other format that we do are these short form stories, and that's what we did at Wild Goose, where we'll set up a studio, we will ask a question, and that question changes depending on who we're talking with and what the community wants to engage in. And we'll ask a question and we'll invite people to respond in 25 words or less. Then we'll do a black and white portrait and we'll combine the photo with the words. So in the course of a day, we can do 40 or 50 or 60 of these as long as people keep circling through. I think for Wild Goose, over 2 days, we had 95 people that came through the studio. And it's a really interesting way to capture or reflect the mission, vision, and values of a conference or a school or a faith community or whatever the group is that we happen to be working with. At the end of the day, whichever format we're using, this project to me is rooted in listening. It's about showing up, doing some deep listening, and really saying overtly or indirectly to everyone that we encounter, I see you, I hear you, and you matter. And what amazes me about this process is that when we show up to listen, and when people are feeling heard, they'll share some really profound and powerful things.
Yeah, as I have been delving into your book, consuming the content, and really getting these stories, really what I could think of is, wow, John's doing what people pay me to do as a therapist. He really listens, and it's profound, and it's transformational, and it's life-changing. So there's that value of being seen. And if talk therapy is, I mean, it's more than that, obviously, but when a person comes in and they share some things they've never told anyone else, that in it of itself is extremely profound. So, and also, as I was reading, I love it how you show up very authentically. Like, I was on a chapter where you're talking about giving yourself grace, giving other people grace when they don't know what to say and they say the wrong thing or they offend. But that's like, you can go back and repair. It's worth it to do that. So anyway, I was touched by all of that. So I guess my question here is, with this journey, obviously you've been feeding your soul, and I'm wondering now what John and Karen's marriage looks like, or even family dynamics look like now after having these experiences. What's different now that your family and your marriage maybe didn't have before? How has that been transformational for you?
That's a good question, and I'll answer it in a couple of ways. First, I think our kids have grown up understanding the value of following your passion, understanding the value of taking some risks, and understanding the value of finding your own voice.
Mm.
And so our oldest is a lighting designer and is about to go out on tour with a musician, and in the next 6 months will be on 6 different continents
Wow.
as he runs lighting and video wall for this musician. And he'll probably wind up with more stamps in his passport than I will, but he's doing what he loves, and he's finding a path to make it work. Our youngest just graduated a year ago with an art degree and is painting and finding their niche, crafting jewelry that has subversive, radical messages on the earrings that say things like he, him, they, them, that say things like my body, my choice, and voicing some of their values in the world through their art, and finding some joy in the fact that people love that and that people want to embrace that.
Wow.
So I think on the one hand, our kids have, one time I talked to them after we were visiting with some of our other suburban friends who were convincing their kids to become an actuary, because the world, you'll always find a job as an actuary, or to become an engineer because it pays well. And I went home and I said to my kids, am I steering you wrong here? Telling you to just do what you love? I said, you're never going to have a normal paycheck. You're never going to know when your next job is coming. You're never going to have certainty around that. And they looked at me and cocked their head a little bit and said, well, that's all we've ever seen you do, Dad. So why would that seem weird?
It's weird to the rest of the culture.
It's weird so many in the semi-professional neighborhood that we grew up in, right? Upper middle class neighborhood that, for the most part, went to an office every day and checked their 401k statement at the end of the month and all of these things. And that just wasn't our life. And so that's what the kids saw, and that's what I think they have embraced in their own life.
Wow.
From a marriage standpoint, I think Karen and I have gone even further out on that limb of accepting uncertainty and maybe not needing to know all of the answers. We're not going to live on the road forever. We can feel some tug towards having a home base again. I mean, we miss friends, we miss community, we meet all of these amazing people on the road, but then we drive on. And so we don't have that regular community that we were accustomed to and that we long for again. But we cannot for the life of us figure out where that will be.
Wow.
There's so many good options in the world. But we also don't feel the pressure to have to decide.
Wow.
We don't need to know right now. And so collectively, both of us, we know that there's an end date to this, but we're patient for it to come.
Well,
go ahead.
If I don't want to interrupt your thought, so if I do, please let me know. But I want to weave together something here, because those that are regular listeners to this podcast may see some threads that I'm hearing from you, John. A few episodes back, I interviewed Gay and Katie Hendricks. Gay is the author of The Genius Zone, but talking about like conscious loving in later years of life. But one of the very necessary things is to tap into your genius zone and your creativity as a couple, as an individual. Well, I have really discovered myself, even working with folks and being in the mental health field for as long as I have, that there is so much that people are in jobs that they don't love, that wears them out, that contributes to their depression. And I just believe we all have this God-given creativity, and to tap into that is so important. Now, maybe not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur or a freelance photographer or whatever, but to tap into that. And I think that's what I'm really so drawn to you and your work, John, and even your family dynamics here as you tell me about this, is that you're tuned into that. And a lot of people are missing out on their lives. They're busy, 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 going, and like Groundhog Day over and over again. But to tune in to a deeper place of one's soul and to know what lights you up and what feeds your soul. That so I just had to make that comment because I think it's
Well,
pretty profound.
yeah, well, thank you for that. And let me point out that like any journey in any path, there are frustrations and difficulties.
Mhm.
Yesterday I had to find a place to dump my gray water tanks in my little van, and I had to stop 4 places before I could figure out actually where to do that. And sometimes and I didn't know where I was gonna park Vinny to sleep last night until the end of the day. And so, sometimes I roll my eyes and I'm like, well, either I'm doing the most brilliant thing in the world or I'm just being foolish for a little while. But at the end of the day, you're right. I have the ability to follow my heart. This project has unfolded as a path of the spirit, sort of a journey that I needed to say yes to. And we say very often that we just walk through the doors that open up to us. And so we have this vision of how the project will unfold, but there are opportunities that we can't even imagine that have presented themselves that because of the choices we've made, that we've been able to say yes to.
Wow.
That is a freedom and a beauty. Frankly, when I think of coming off of the road, sometimes I panic a little bit, thinking I don't know that I can close the door on this chapter because it's so rich and rewarding and uncertain and beautiful and all of those other things.
Well, not only that, it's kind of like you're awakening so many of us that are like reading your book. You're awakening because even seeing your display and even the folks there at the Wild Goose that I kind of rub shoulders with a little bit, and then seeing their portraits, your image that you captured of them and what they said, and it deepens this connection, this human connection. And that's a big, big thing to do. And it's so needed. And I guess what I'm saying is this is more like world peace right here. Like we are like you're part of this. It's a bigger thing. Um anyway, that's a thought that came to my mind.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because that's certainly the goal, is to help us see ourselves and those around us in new and transformative ways. And a couple of thoughts in that regard. The first is that when I interview people, when I meet people, I have 3 audiences that I consider in that process. And the first audience is me, because when I meet you, when I meet Bushi, when I meet all of these other people, I'm enriched and I learn in that process.
Mm-hmm.
I'm encountering difference. I am encountering new ideas and other worldviews, and I am enriched by that process.
Mm.
The second audience, so that's pretty selfish, right? I'm doing this because wow, I love it. It's amazing,
Yeah.
and I learned so
And
much,
it feeds your soul. And we
and
all
it
our
feeds my
no souls need
soul.
to be fed.
So I'm really greedy in that regard.
Yeah.
The second audience is you or every other person that I encounter, because again, I want people to come away from this experience feeling whole,
Mm.
feeling alive, feeling seen and heard and valued. So
Mm.
those are 2 very small audiences. The third audience is the general public.
Mm.
And this is the public programming that we do.
Mm-hmm.
As we bring these stories around, as we move our exhibits around, as I do lectures and workshops on storytelling, I assume that if I'm going to learn something from these stories, that other people can as well. And so we hope to present these stories of hope and transformation and justice to the world, so that people can start to challenge their own expectations, so that they
Mm.
can recognize their own blind spots, so that they can be willing to stay at the table to explore the complexity of some of these really difficult issues.
And I love that. It's being able to hold the tension of our differences and to be able to even look past those, what we may not be able, those labels or those differences, and to really see into that other person. So I guess it's kind of like very unique, I think, what you're doing, at least unique to me, the bit that you have this global, you've got an influence that's bigger than you with the work and the people. And then also it's very intimate as well as big.
Yeah,
Which
it's got a foot in both of those worlds, that is very much relational in these exchanges, but then it's very much community and world based in its approach to things like compassion and justice. And I want to point out, because sometimes I think the word peace gets a little bit lost in rainbows and daisies and unicorns. And the truth of it is, I'm this middle-aged white guy. I'm the poster child of privilege, traveling through the country, having these conversations with people who don't necessarily share that same privilege with me. And so the question for myself is, what do I do with that privilege? How can I use that to leverage a broader understanding of the world? And so I will move frequently into communities that I'm not fully informed on. I'm not a part of this community or that community. And so what I'm hoping to do, nobody owes me this, but what I'm hoping to do is, if people are open to conversation, to talk about experience, that we can share that time together. And that I hope that can broaden my understanding of the world, and that I hope it can broaden other people's understanding of the world. So especially these last 2 years, we've been diving into some really challenging conversations. We spent 6 weeks along the border talking about immigration. We spent time in Mississippi talking about race and moving Confederate monuments. We spent time with veterans up in the Pacific Northwest talking about trauma and PTSD and suicide prevention. And I call this work public art, and it only works when the public shows up. I'm simply a facilitator. I'm simply a curator. Bring it down even a level further, I'm simply a curious human being that wants to understand how we can bridge some of these divides, and how we can build community, and how we can see each other as more fully human. And so it has been a journey of discovery for me. I've learned I learn how little I know almost every day. I learn where I have more work to do almost every day. But we can only start where we are and try to move forward. And that's the goal.
Absolutely. We are busting through some really strong neural pathways, right? Busting through some limited beliefs about ourselves, some arrogance, and all of that stuff that comes with it. Years ago, as I started out in my career as a counselor, it's actually a second career for me, because I raised 4 kids in a difficult marriage, that first career, but the second career being my counseling. And I really began to see people, very intentional to see them as divine appointments. If I look at every human being that takes a lot of courage to call a counselor or to walk through the doors of my counseling office, and I see them as a divine appointment, that's a different mentality there. And it has really enriched my life to do that. But so that's why I resonate with you on so many levels. John, especially like following your passion, that takes an increased awareness and being intentional, and then taking these risks of growth. That's my acronym for growth, like breathing fresh air, the awareness, intentionality, and growth. It's like, it's everywhere in what you're doing. So anyway, I want to commend you. What would you say to the person who's listening to this? And maybe maybe this conversation is stirring something in this other person that's listening or watching this interview, and they feel stuck, or they feel that they're not feeding their soul. What would you say to them?
All right, I will make advice, but I will tell people that they are responsible for their own decisions, so that if I give you bad advice and you follow it and things fall apart,
It's their own
that's
fault.
part that's a part of the process. That's a part of the learning. Um, so no, I'm kidding. Well, I'm not kidding, but
I
here's
get it.
in all seriousness, here's what I see people do. Here's what I've seen myself do earlier in my life that I've gotten better at not doing. I see people uh, light this little spark,
Mm,
right? This little glow begins, and they get super excited about something, and then when they think of the prospect of the bigger flame, they get a little nervous and they back away from it, and they let the spark just sort of wither away and burn out. And they say, oh, that's not for me, or that's not really responsible, or that's a little foolish, or maybe that's somebody else's job to do. They get really excited about this thing until they get to the edge, and then they get scared and they back away. What I would encourage people to do is, if you have that little spark, uh, to guard it
mm,
and protect it and fan it a little bit, sometimes gently, sometimes vigorously. You have to pay attention to the spark, because if you fan it too hard, it can blow it out. But you'll know what it needs. But don't be afraid of it. Foster it and follow it, because it could turn into the light that leads to your path that you can't even see right now.
wow, that's great. I think yes, we all need to pay attention to what lights us up. And
Yeah.
it is, I mean, it's a risk. It's a risk. Life is a risk anyway, but like you can either live very small or choose to live in that risk of growth. And like, yeah, like I say, breathing fresh air. It's like,
Well, and
you
and
know,
and let me say very clearly, I'm 55 years old. We've been on the road for 2 years now, working on this project that has been going for a dozen years. I honestly don't know yet if this is the most brilliant visionary thing or the most foolish thing that we've ever done in our lives,
yeah.
but I do know that it is the path that we belong on. And I do know that if I wasn't doing this right now, um, that I would be regretting it in some fashion. We're living fully, with all of the risk and all of the benefit that comes with that,
Yeah.
and we're doing it together.
Yeah. Who was it? Was it Mark Twain that says you're not going to regret what you did do, but you're going to regret what you didn't do? Somebody said that. I don't know who it was.
Somebody smart said something like that, and I agree completely. Yeah.
Don, thank you so much. What a brilliant light you are. I just enjoyed this time talking with you. How can folks get in touch with you? Because they're going to want to see your work. They're going to want to read your books. They're going to want to be a part of what you're doing. How can they get in touch?
Yeah, of course. Well, those books are everywhere. It's called Portraits of Peace: Searching for Hope in a Divided America.
I love the cover, by the way.
Yeah,
I think
that
it's
is
really good.
not the camper we live in, by the way. That's just one that we happened upon as we were traveling. Um, and so that's in bookstores. It's online in all the places. But people can follow along on social media. People can find our website. It's just the acronym for the project, A Piece of My Mind. So it's APOMM.net. And that
Awesome.
will direct you to Instagram and Facebook and all of the other things. But we try to post new content daily and new interviews weekly. And we try to uplift and amplify the voices of people who are finding creative solutions to our most challenging issues. And I hope that people will follow along.
I love it. It's a great fit for better relationships, better life. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
It's great to talk with you, Judy. Thanks.
It's easy to get narrow focused when you're in the midst of personal stress or difficulties in your relationship. But this conversation with John was so enlightening to me, bringing awareness that expands to a bigger perspective of peace. Here's some things I'm pondering. Number one, when stressful times show up in our lives, it's an opportunity to tune in to a greater understanding of your passion. And number 2, John talked about navigating risks, getting used to uncertainty, and not knowing whether an idea is foolish or whether this idea is a spark to be fanned that could possibly bring light into this world. And number 3, our growth and deeper connection with ourselves and others is rooted in listening. What a gift we give when we take the time to see, hear, and affirm another. And I want to say to you that you matter. What stood out to you? Share your takeaways by going to betterrelationshipsbetterlife.com. Next week, you'll hear me on the other side of the microphone. My friend and colleague Rebecca Green interviews me, and you'll discover the deeper story of why I'm passionate about this podcast and the work that I do. Until then, I would absolutely love it for you to share, subscribe, rate, and comment in the streaming platform of your choice. See you next time on Better Relationships, Better Life.